Well, hello, Luis. How are you?
Good, Julie. How are you?
I'm good. It's so good to see you.
Good to see you as well. It's been a little while.
It's been a little while. Yeah, we were just talking. We got to meet in person last year, which was such an expansive day. And the tacos were really good too.
They really were.
Um, I was if it's okay with you, Luis, I would love for you to just introduce yourself and just give our audience a little sense of who you are and what your life is like and just kind of a
Yeah,
little
absolutely. So
intro.
I am Luis Rivera, and by training, I'm a physical therapist and an athletic trainer. But I currently am the founder and advisor to a company called Ready Rebound, based out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We are the nation's only healthcare navigation and logistics company dedicated to first responders. So, what that means specifically is just like when an athlete gets hurt in the NFL or Major League Baseball or the NBA, they get a layer or a level of treatment that is really unknown to most people in terms of gaining access to the highest level of providers, be it cardiologists, oncologists, orthopedic surgeons in the country, at a very expedited rate, and someone to kind of walk them through their whole healthcare journey. We now do the same thing for our nation's first responders.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. Well, I will, if it's okay with you, I'm gonna out you, Luis, and just kind of tell our audience that, there's kind of the mechanics of GTD, there's the kind of the practices, which we'll get into in a second, and then there's the why it matters. And I remember you said to me, you wanted to make a big dent in the universe, and I will never forget it because it felt like it, I felt it. So if you could, maybe we could just hear a little bit about your GTD history, like what led you to getting things done in the first place?
Yeah, so I was with a company based out of Oak Brook in Illinois called Athletico Physical Therapy, and their founder, Mark Kaufman, had introduced me to GTD really early on in my process of onboarding with the organization. So
Mm.
this had to be what, 2009, I want to say, when I
Well,
first got introduced to it, and read the book. He had put a lot of the practices into place in our company at the time, which at the time it was only 54 locations in the Chicagoland area. But he was a really big believer in culture and had created this
mm,
culture of efficiency, I'll call it, because we had limited resources in terms of time and money and people. So the more efficient we could be, the better off the company would be as well.
well,
So introduced really just through the book. And then I would want to say in 2011, maybe, um, I went to a course in Chicago. It was just the 1 day seminar. I can't remember who the instructor was at the time, but sat through this course and really quickly learned like it wasn't necessarily about the specific tool, right? It was
yeah,
about how you used your tool.
yeah.
The instructor did make recommendations saying like in his experience there were certain tools that like made things easier to integrate and roll together. So for me, I just went out and like whatever he needed, whatever he suggested at the time, I just purchased, went out and bought and integrated. And that's kind of how really I'd say my official journey began.
Yeah.
Even though I had read the book and was doing some of the work, began kind of that day, I would say.
It sounds like you were kind of really, kind of self-starting, practicing. Like what was the thing? It was like, like, the question that you wanted to resolve vis-a-vis getting some help.
Yeah, the what I found was that everyone says they're busy all the time, including myself,
Yeah.
right? But busy doesn't mean productive.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get to a point in my work and study of this stuff, right? That when I felt busy, it wasn't because I was unorganized. It was truly because I was busy, right?
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
my efficiencies were so good and dialed in that if I felt that way, that there was something I needed to pause and think about, right?
Yeah.
So I felt like if I had the best tools, the best coaching, the best all of that stuff in place, that I could get to that point with this stuff and implement it at a level that I had never even tried to implement it before. And I
Yeah.
felt like the only way to really do that was to have you be there
Yeah.
and watch and listen and hear and
Yeah.
see me kind of do my day. And I think that was really powerful, right? For both of us, probably.
Yeah, it was incredible. And it was, sometimes, I never know what's going to happen in these engagements. And some people, I kind of have to like inch by inch, it's like they're, whatever their kind of nervousness or fear or kind of maybe questioning about it, it's more like inch by inch. With you, like we just took the deep dive. I remember in your office with like the whiteboards on the wall, and it was like, we're doing this like
Yeah.
full throttle. And I just want to make a comment on what you shared, because I think it's so important, this aspect of being busy, that is like a word that is, it's in the lexicon now, but it's like, doesn't, I'm just always questioning, like, what does it really mean? And so what I'm hearing you say, and I don't want to put my words on this, but it sounds like, take the GTD lexicon out of it, control and perspective. It sounds like you want to be more intentional,
Correct.
or maybe there's a different word, but it's like that, I know Brad Keywell, who was the founder of Groupon, he called it precise intentionality. And I always love that. That always stuck with me. So I've pretty much made the decision, like, I'm taking busy out of my lexicon. Like,
Yeah.
doesn't mean anything. Productive, intentional, conscious, like, all of those things that feel more aligned to me. So it sounds like you're doing something similar.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that like part of this journey too was really trying to figure out, and I know they don't use the same language anymore, but when I initially studied GTD, it was the plane landing, right? It was the,
But yeah,
50,000 feet.
10,000 foot.
Exactly, right.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's the memory of this I have, so I still use it. And
yeah,
like really it was like going all the way up, right, to figure out what my purpose is, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
then kind of rewinding that back. And you could get like, obviously, you can get crazy granular on stuff, right? With
yeah,
like every second of every day, you could get, obsessive compulsive if you really want to get crazy with it.
yeah,
But at the same time, there are levels of stuff that, like, again, it's just a check-in, right? Like, you look at your calendar and your day and your phone calls, and you're like, all right, did that? I feel like inherently you kind of know whether or not the day aligned or not.
yeah,
But if you're feeling like it's not, especially on a consistent basis,
yeah,
you need to pause and like re-look at that, and then look at your stuff, and
yeah.
then combine the two, right?
What is, yeah, it is the intersection of control and perspective. And that's really where we started. You had already had like the first, your ground level, your project level was really dialed in. We really started, it was like that kind of 20,000 foot to 50,000 feet, which we call horizon 2 to 5 now, is really what our even initial focus was on. I think it will be helpful to hear, Luis, if you want to share a little bit about the cognitive, we call it Kairos assessment now, and how that impacted or influenced or kind of drove nuance into your GTD practice, just by knowing, understanding what your preferences are, and how they were kind of maybe in the background before, and how we brought them to the forefront.
Yeah, so I can't remember if it was you or how I got connected to the cognitive side of the house.
Well, it was because it
It
was
was.
really, by then we were working with Frank with all of our
Yeah.
clients.
Yeah, so that's I can tell you where I was sitting
I love it.
when I took the first call from Frank, because it was so shocking. It was shocking, but not at the same time. What I mean by that is, like, I had done the whole test, right?
Yeah.
And I really wasn't expecting Frank to call me back. I didn't know if it was someone else. I didn't really know, right? So I get this call from Frank, and I'm sitting in the parking lot at the gym, and he's like, he basically tells me that he's calling me specifically because my scores were so unique, he wanted to learn more. And I was like,
Yeah.
wow, I don't even know what that really means, right?
Yeah.
And then he started telling me about like my scores and like the associative score and like all the other pieces of the puzzle and how
Yeah.
they how that impacted the associative. And it really like helped me connect a lot of dots on myself, like kind of
Yeah.
like validating the beliefs you had, but through like a third party, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's
And
like this external validation of some part of inside of you, but you don't have the language for.
correct, yeah. And now, when I did that, I think that combined with our work, right?
Yeah.
It's about having coaches, right?
Yeah.
For me
Yeah.
personally, and like knowing how to use them and when makes sense, right? But then also like tying it all together,
Yeah.
right? And they found that my associative preference was so high and off the charts, but when combined with my mover score and my listener score, um
Observer.
observer score, and you put it all kind of together, it
Yeah.
made more sense why I was able to create such not only a successful business in Ready Rebound, but even my journey to Ready Rebound, right?
Mm.
Like why I've always had success along the way,
Yeah.
but almost like why it all connected and why I was able to connect it. And what we found for me that was probably the most true was, this ability I have, you and I always joke about superpowers, right? And
Yeah.
like
Yep.
this ability I have, my current board chair and lead investor said that I can't think of his name now, but the gentleman that founded Netflix,
Mm.
um, that when he knew him, when Darren was at Best Buy and this guy was at Netflix, when he knew him and met him and worked kind of had talked to him several times, he said he had this unique ability to see around corners was
Mm.
the word he used.
Yeah.
And I got it. Like I get that. He's like, you
Yeah.
have that. He's like, I can't
Yep.
define it on you, but whatever he had, you have too. And I had heard that from Frank, right? This ability to like, he calls it my bloodhound skill, right? Like
Yeah. Like see
I
past it
yeah, I
almost.
can see past things and
Yeah.
smell things in the air that others can't. And I think to me that's where the Kairos stuff really started, like when you combine that with like with the work side of it, right?
Yeah.
The actual calendar management and the day-to-day, the work, I'll call it. When you combine those two things, really something powerful really starts to form, in my opinion.
We don't know what we don't know. We can't see what we can't see. We can't see what that other person can see so obviously. And like, there's just so much value in that.
Yeah. I
I
mean,
can
even
say
when
that as a coach.
yeah, well, when you were in the room with me, I remember vividly you were having me do my emails, right?
Mm.
And there was a moment, like, as like I have this ability to like hyper focus on
Yeah.
something, and I was into it and I paused because I actually felt you looking at me and I was like, what's going on? I looked over and you're like, that was crazy. And you were like, you've been going for like 30 minutes and haven't looked up. I'm like, no, like that's just how I work. I said, but then I get tired. And
Yeah.
that's when you pulled out the Cairo stuff and you're like, yeah, but you're a mover. You're like, so just get up and move around for like even 2 minutes,
Yeah.
and I guarantee you can plug back in. And I use that now all the time.
Yeah.
Like if I feel my energy start to sink a little bit,
Yeah.
I just stand up and like walk around the room or on my Zoom call or whatever. Like, and people just know that now. Like they're not weirded out
What
by
it's a reset as a very, very active fellow active mover. It's like a reset.
yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't have to be like a 30-minute walk. It's just like,
Mm-mm.
I think that's the other piece of it too, is people put these things on it, right? And they're like, oh, I'm a mover. Like, I need to go, walk for an hour at lunch. I'm like, no, you don't actually. Like, you just need this brief instance to like plug back in and then you'll be good again, right?
Yeah.
They got to see it, they got to try it, right? And
Yeah.
then learn to like, you know, pull this lever a little bit. And that's where that's where the coaching comes in too, right? It's like, all right, that's working, but how do we get even better? Well, let's try and pull this lever down a little bit and see what it does, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Make it
Well, it's that
better.
refinement of the understanding and then the practice of it.
Absolutely.
What would you say, Luis, if someone was kind of on the fence about getting coaching, like they've been studying, I think it's kind of human nature in a way to kind of want to figure this stuff out on our own. Like, I just want to like prove to myself, so, what would you say to someone that's like, sort of like, they've kind of hit a wall, or or maybe even for some people really haven't started yet. Like, what would you share with them in terms of the value you've received?
Man, that's a great, I don't even know how to put
Not to put you on the spot.
no, I don't even know how to put a number to it, or a, the values all in the work you put in after the coaching, right? But, so here's a good example. I'm a physical therapist and an athletic trainer. And 2 mornings a week, I work out with a personal trainer. Why?
Yeah.
Like, I know all the stuff,
Yeah.
right? But it's the same thing. Like, you almost need someone, and it's human nature, right? We use the word drift all the time, right?
Yeah.
It's human nature to drift side to side in your journey. You almost want this in place to not only put you on the tracks, but also setting it up in a way that, like, you're still going to drift. Like, if you were with me every day, that wouldn't work either, right?
Yeah.
Then you
Yeah.
can't, like, maybe there's a level.
You're not integrating on your own if you're
Correct. Yeah, but like, you almost need to find out what that is for you and create a specific journey to, like, allow you to drift, but not drift so far where you're like way over here and like we got to spend 6 months getting it back to center, right?
Yeah.
So to me, that's the beauty of the program and the system, is like an access to you and Frank, is like my ability to do that, right? And then you combine it with like I'll call it like the mini touches in between, right? So like sometimes you and I connect because there's like one thing that seems off and I'm like, hey, this feels off. I catch it. And instead of waiting till our next session, I just ping you, right? Like there's so much power in like just that. It's almost like, almost how my company's built, to be honest with you, in terms of like my staff's, advocacy and navigation for our first responders. You and Frank and others, for me, are those navigators and advocates in my journey around this work, right?
Well, I think your openness too, you're very coachable, and you have given me the space and the permission to like kind of call you out, and not just that, but like the subtleties, like we're kind of in our worlds and we're doing us, right? Sometimes it takes that other person to say, hey, over here, like, wait a second, what's that thing you keep pushing past? It's like, let's take a look at that. And I really appreciate your willingness to kind of go to that level of like depth and nuance.
Yeah, because otherwise, I mean, why do it, right? Otherwise, like, for me at least, like, I want to hear it. Now, our agreement is like, I'm going to hear you. It doesn't mean I'm going to change right now, right? But I'm going to listen, right, and absorb it.
It's always for your consideration. It's not like, here, go do this.
Exactly.
Like, you get to decide for yourself, what's true.
Exactly.
It's a partnership. It's not like, I'm not a third grade teacher.
Exactly.
Anything else, Luis, that you're just like, you want to share? Any insights? I could talk to you all day. So,
I feel like society is starting to catch up to this stuff finally.
Yeah.
And I believe that the people that watch this are, you're going to have your early adopters in anything, right?
Yeah.
And that second ring of people, what I would tell them that are starting to onboard and read the book and do all the stuff, right, is that they got to stay committed to at least continuing the journey for at least a solid year so that they can see the result, right? It's just like trying to get fit, right?
Yeah.
You know, you're not going to see it in the first 4 weeks. You're not going to see it by reading the book. Now you're going to see little things, right? Like, you know, your pants fit a little better, or your shirt fits a little better, whatever, right? But like, or you have a little bit more energy, but you can't just stop there, right?
Yeah.
I think of like the first rule, right? Which is like, you know, if you can do it in under 2 minutes, do it now, right?
Yeah.
Like that's kind of where it all started, in all honesty, for me, is like
Yeah.
simple first step. And that's the, you know, I don't know, I mean, whatever, however many years that is, 20 years almost since I've been playing with this stuff. Like, you know, it's it's that first step, right? And I
Yeah.
still go back, you know, I never go, if I go back, I always like at least go back to there. And I'm like, all right, let's just get back to that ground rule.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Back to the basics.
Yeah.
That's the thing. You're only ever like one weekly review away from getting back into control.
Yeah, exactly. It's not about your system. It's about like how you're using it. Like if you like pen and paper, or if you like, you know, the Stephen
Yeah.
Covey notebook or whatever, like, you know, if you want to use that stuff, use it. But like this is going to help you refine your process even more.
Well, I'll reach out to Allison because we're probably overdue for a GTD
Yeah.
check. And so I'll do that next.
Okay.
And in the meantime, just cannot thank you enough. Your time is very valuable and we just so appreciate it.
Thank you. It was great doing this with you, and appreciate everything for you too. Good seeing you.